Oh yeah, the negative emotions are much more. So in our evolutionary past, if there was a rustle in the grass, it was better to be wrong 99 times out of 100, thinking it might be a tiger or a predator of some sort, because the one time it's going to kill you. Whereas if you've got lots of bushes and berries or something you can hunt, that you need for food, if you miss one, there'll be another one along. So in a sense, the positive emotions, which are much more about creating and seizing opportunities, are a lower value to us in the moment in our evolutionary history. So we have this bias, which is that we take attention of the negative. So in a work situation, we can go through the day, we're doing good work, and then one barbed comment comes in and all our attention goes on that negative thing. We forget about all the other time that was good. We just pay attention to that negative. And that's because it's such a threat to us. And we actually have to work in the modern world to get over that.
When attempting a world's first, we don't just look at the physical aspects as well. For me to get up a mountain, swim across the channel, as well as cycle across America, I need experts in all fields. And that's why I've brought Nic Marks, founder and director of Friday Pulse, here today. So welcome, Nic.
Nice to meet you, Kate.
Yeah, likewise. We met online. We're in social isolation at the moment. So a lot of my networking is being done through platforms such as LinkedIn, and I fell upon your bio and it was really interesting, and I thought that I'd bring you here and we could have a deeper conversation around what Friday Pulse is, and also potentially how you see my competition or my challenge, and what I need to sort of look into that to make sure I get up that mountain, so to speak.
Wouldn't be my thing, but I mean, like with any goal, it's how you chunk it up and how you set yourself small goals along the way. But and in some ways, my business is called Friday Pulse, and the idea about that is it's based on a weekly cadence, asking people how they are every week at work. And I think it will be the same you with your challenge. You've got, I don't know, what is it, a 2-year program you're sort of working towards?
Yeah.
So there's 104 weeks there. And how are those weeks going? And you'll have good and bad weeks, but you'll want to have more good weeks than bad weeks. You want to be progressing towards your goal more. You'll probably have some injuries along the way and some setbacks. How do you bounce back and recover from those? And those are similar challenges that we have when we're looking about how do you create, teams with great morale that are working towards their goals. So in some ways, there are some of the principles that are quite similar.
Yeah, and you've got a very impressive bio. So you've worked with people such as the Blair and Cameron governments, and given advice on well-being to multiple organisations as well. Even though we're a micro team, because it will be me and a band of 20 random individuals who've unwittingly said yes to helping me. What do you measure when you're looking at happiness or well-being?
So I started work on well-being sort of 20 years ago, though even for 10 years before that, I was a statistician working on quality of life. And then I started working more into experience of life. That became quite interesting to me. And my background is, yes, a statistician, but also my mother was a family therapist. And I trained as a psychotherapist when I was young too. And although I never really worked very much as a psychotherapist, those ideas have really influenced my statistical work and my work since. And trying to get into those sort of intangibles about motivation, about, how do we adjust our behavior, and understanding really that emotions are very much at the heart of that. And so as a statistician, I'm like, well, how can you measure that? And the reality is that we can create measures of it. We can't measure people's whole experience. And in fact, even if you use neuroscientists and use brain scans, it gets a very confusing world when we start looking at emotions. So something like fear and excitement can look quite similar in terms of their fingerprint in the body, but they're obviously experienced very differently. But the main thing that you can measure ad signal, which is, are things going well or are they not? And that's at the heart of our human and our emotional and our felt experience, is a very strong signal in humans, which is, should we approach or avoid? And in some ways, I imagine I'm not someone that stretches myself physically. That's not my buzz in life. There's a difference between all of us, but I do stretch myself intellectually, emotionally, in lots of other ways. And I think it's the same. It must be the same with physical stuff, is that you have to get through the pain to get through the other side. So you have to have that bigger vision that takes you beyond that sometimes. But these emotions and the way we feel are really ways that we learn as humans, and they're ways that we create better futures for ourselves. And so they're very, very thing. But the thing we can measure best is the good bad signal. And we ask that very simply. I mean, actually, when I was working with the Blair and Cameron governments, I was working much more like a traditional survey person, where you ask lots and lots of questions, and actually it gets really boring to answer those questions. And I've learned to get much, much simpler. So instead of asking people occasionally a lot of questions, I ask people regularly a simple question like, how have you felt this week? And I think you should be asking yourself that every week. How has the week gone this week? How have I felt emotionally? How have I felt physically? And what's gone well and what hasn't? And build on what's gone well and fix what hasn't.
Yeah, it's very true, because we can only deal with what we have in the moment as well. So it's building. Next week will be built on this week, and if this week was a pretty crappy week for whatever reason, that needs to be taken into account for future plans.
Yeah,
and
it's
go on. Sorry.
Well, it's reflecting on that very regularly. I mean, that's the therapeutic process too. I don't know if have you ever done any therapy or counselling?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it works very well when you get into rhythm of doing it like regularly. And actually, sometimes if people are doing it in a stressful emergency situation, they might only be given 6 sessions on the NHS or something like that. And actually, in my opinion, that's not really long enough. And actually, what tends to happen with therapy or counselling is that if you do it regularly, like once a week for some periods, then the insights really start to come. And in a sense, I call it a ritual and a rhythm. And you'll be very much in a rhythm with your work. I'm not saying join a therapist, but I am saying that the process of therapy is interesting, because by doing it every week, we get into this reflective space every week. You have the therapeutic hour where you sit with the therapist or the counselor, but you also, as you're traveling towards that, if maybe you're traveling half an hour to get there, you start reflecting, getting yourself in the mode. Afterwards, if you're wise, you don't rush on to the next thing. You take time to integrate what you've learned in that hour. So you might spend 3 or 4 hours a week reflecting in that process. And I think that if you're going towards a big goal, you need to build in reflection time every week, so that you're thinking about, how you felt about it, how you're going to think very much in your body, about how every part of your body's feeling and what's going on. And that's obviously for some sports person to help sort you out with, but taking that time to reflect and do that and build that into your program.
Would you say that the bigger the goal, the more time of reflection is required, or is that quite a crude analogy?
I've never thought about that. I think that what is a big goal? I mean,
it's very subjective. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're obviously talking about a huge physical challenge, Iron Man on steroids or whatever it is, Iron Woman on steroids, it's a massive, it's the biggest triathlon you can do, isn't it? You're going to run up Everest or whatever you're going to do. But it's like, so you are setting yourself a huge physical challenge. Yeah. And of course, people set themselves different challenges. I have a business I'm setting up, and it's a challenge. And sometimes, you have to just chunk it down into what I can do this week. I think everyone has a goal in a life, in a sense, to build a better life. Well, maybe not. Some people aren't very reflective. What I think is that if you want to build a good life, you need to be reflective. And you don't have to go to therapy, you don't have to whatever, but you do need to be, reflecting on how your life is going and thinking back, because that's how we learn, And so in that sense, I think that's an important criteria. And that can be through an artistic practice. It can be through a creative practice. I think a lot of my friends who are artists or who are poets or whatever, mine is walking. I mean, I'm a walker, and if I go out every day and have an hour's walk, my days are better, because I just take that time to pad around and walk, and I like walking with my wife, and we do go walking together. but I actually like walking on my own as well. And I think it's important to have that time, so yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've got a very full diary, as you can imagine, because I'm setting up my business and I've got now hundreds of hours of training that's looming ahead. And it's interesting to put the downtime, as you said, the reflective time to process what I'm doing as well as what I've done.
I think that's really important. Yes. And I don't know, I mean, you must have to do physical renewal every week. I imagine that if you're an athlete, you're not at peak performance the whole time, are you? You're letting your muscles relax. I mean, I know people do ice baths and whatever they do. I don't know what you do, but your reflection might be able to be happening simultaneously with some of that time. But I think that you need that mental and cognitive reflection as well as the physical renewal period. Yeah. Restoration period.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, we're now stepping into emotives. It's sort of qualitative results, if we want to call it that. Is there any way, seeing that you are also the statistician, that we can measure this? That I could have a beautiful graph that not just tracks my strength or my speed, but also tracks my emotional stability?
Yeah, I think so. And I would actually do something very, very simple. This is actually the heart of Friday Pulse that we do with teams at work and businesses, which is we ask on a Friday because that's the end of the week, but whatever the end of your week feels like, we ask people, how have you felt this week, from very unhappy to very happy? And it's a 5-point scale. And if you drew a sort of, a Gantt chart of like, every month or every quarter, 13 weeks going across, and you've got 8 quarters to where you're going, however you want to do it, and you just colored in, you could just do this with a colored pen. Was it a great week, which is a sort of bright green? Was it a good week green? Was it okay yellow? Was it poor orange? And was it bad red? And you just colored that chart in, and you try to have as many green or light green weeks as you can, but you must be really honest with yourself. You can't be like the Uber driver thing where we all give everyone 5. Yeah. Okay. Because then you've just got a 1-0 scale, which is, was it good or was it not? So when you're rating an Uber, we all say 5 because we know it's his rating or her rating. And, so we know they need to have that. But what you really want to do is know, okay, it was good this week. It was a 4, it was a green, and then if it's a great week, you've got to leave your space for that great week, and you've got to leave a space for the okays, and you're going to have okays. And then, you might get injured, something else might go on, and you have a red week, or maybe you have a red 4 or 5 weeks. But if you color it every week, what you'll notice is your resilience is that you might have setbacks, but you'll bounce back. And that the scoring of it is not only helping you reflect in the week, it will help you look back over a period of time and go, yeah, I've had that before. Look, it took me 3 weeks to get back. Fine. I know where I am. I'll plan. Maybe I'll do it in 2 weeks this time, but you'll see yourself bouncing back. And it's amazing how quickly we forget our emotional experience of life, and so by recording it each week, it actually will make you feel more secure that you are resilient and competent and can get there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And something I'm left thinking about is, do we clutch onto the negative quicker or more? Is it more sticky than the positive?
Yeah, the negative is very, very pervasive. And we see that with our media. Media always tells us negative stories because it grabs our attention. And there's evolutionary reasons for this, which is that when things are bad, they can kill us. And, effectively our so-called negative emotions, psychologists tend to talk about positive and negative emotions. And so the negative ones are not dysfunctional. They're uncomfortable or difficult sometimes, but, fear and anger and sadness, which is about loss, are traditionally called negative, and they're basically dealing with threats to us. So, fear and anger are part of the fight and flight mechanism, and so, when we're angry, we're starting for a fight, and that uses a lot of energy, and actually it's very stressful on the body. I mean, you'll know this. I imagine that. So, if you play team sports, or have you always been an individual sports person?
I have played a little bit of team when I was in university.
Yeah, I mean, it's the worst thing for your teammates and you if you get angry in a team sport. You're cross with the referee or you're cross with yourself. The red mist comes down and you're out of the game. And actually, I know that sports psychologists for teams, they treat people to process anger very quickly. Put it aside, and in the moment, need to deal with that emotion, move on. You see it with you know, I watch a bit of football and rugby, you know, like many men. I'm missing it at the moment. No, I'm not actually. I don't miss it. I'm a very casual watcher. But you do see these very impressive people, you know, absolutely furious about a decision. And then 10 seconds later, they've just, you know, pushed the ball away and they're in the game again. And then you see the ones where it clouds them for the next, you know, 10 minutes. And of course, they're out of the game. So so how you process those, I've forgotten where I started with that, but it's how you process those quickly. And, oh yeah, the negative emotions are much more. So in our evolutionary past, you know, if there was a rustle in the grass, it was better to be wrong 99 times out of 100, thinking it might be a tiger or a predator of some sort, because the one time it's going to kill you. Whereas if you've got lots of bushes and berries or something you can hunt, you know, that you need for food, you know, if you miss one, there'll be another one along. So in a sense, the positive emotions, which are much more about creating and seizing opportunities, are a lower value to us in the moment in our evolutionary history. So we have this bias, which is that we take attention of the negative. So in a work situation, we can go through the day, we're doing good work, and then one barbed comment comes in and all our attention goes on that negative thing. We forget about all the other time that was good. We just pay attention to that negative. And that's because it's such a threat to us. And we actually have to work in the modern world to get over that and actually remember the positive much more. So, you know, you will have a lot of pain, a lot of difficulty. You know what you're getting into. You will have a lot of that, yeah. But you've got to remember the good things, and I think you've got to write them down. So another thing that psychologists often talk about is it's called a gratitude diary, or 3 good things, which is that at the end of every day, write down 3 good things that have happened today. And write them down, okay? And it's really important not just to think these things. It's why we also keep a score. You know, you've got to write them down, because if you just hold them in your head, you forget about them. If you write them down, these were the 3 good things that happened today. You know, and it might be something about, you know, your partner, or you've got stepchildren, haven't you? You know, whatever it is. You know, it might be something little. It might be something about the sun coming out. It might be something about your training. But write down the good things and write them down, because these are the things that nourish us. And you know, you'll remember the negative ones anyway, so you don't worry with writing them down. Write down the positive ones, because we forget those. And do that every day, and every week, you know, take some time to reflect. You can do it every day. I mean, I think possibly when you're in the cycling across America or going up Everest, maybe you need to do it every day. You know, like, was it a good day today? You know, because how many days would it take you to cycle across America?
Well, it's 3,100 miles, so I'm intending to do it in between 7 and 10 days, depending on the weather.
Yeah, so you chunk that up into, you know, was it a good day? I mean, you take that same principle of, like, give yourself a score, emotional score, and you can do physical score too, you know, whatever it is, but give yourself an emotional score. What's gone well, what hasn't, and you can add to that who I want to thank. Who do I appreciate for supporting me? So you say you've got a team of 20 around you. You know, you need to make sure that you are appreciating them, and that you are thanking them, and that you're you know, and you will feel better for thanking them, and they will feel better for being thanked. And that's a sort of what we sometimes call a positivity resonance, that, you know, my positivity affects you, and it comes back, and that builds. There's a psychologist called Barbara Fredrickson. I don't know if you've heard of her. She wrote a book called Love 2.0. I don't really like the title, but what she was talking about was that micro love between, you know, platonic love between people, where positivity builds on positivity. And so that's what you want to be doing. The negatives will take care of itself. The positives you need to really be conscious about.
Yeah, that's something I'll definitely implement. I've also started to introduce creativity, finding something that caught my attention or curiosity every day, to remove the complacency that I sort of found creeping in my daily routines as well.
Yeah, we are curious beings, and we like novelty, and aesthetics and beauty are really important to us. In fact, my wife was asking me today, what is beauty to you? She goes, so of course I said her, but then I said, you know, nature, you know, I think, you know, immersed in nature, it's a beautiful experience. Psychologists talk about awe and wonder, and these emotions that take us out of ourselves. They give us a sort of rising, reaching feeling. You know, when we're in awe, I mean, you know, when you, I don't know, I walk on cliff tops sometimes, not at the moment because it's an unnecessary journey to go to the beach probably now, but you know, when you walk on a cliff top and you see the ocean and you see the sea, you know, it makes you sort of both feel connected and really small, and there's something very lovely about that sort of miracle of how wonderful the world is, and it helps us actually prioritize our goals and helps us reset our agendas. So, you know, I mean, you're doing something crazily big, you know, but also crazily small in a sense, in that you're just a human being and you're just going to take your body by your own propulsion up things, through things, across things, you know. I mean, in some ways it's in some ways it's huge, and in some ways it's entirely trivial. And in a way, that's how life is, isn't it? It's like everything to us, and it's kind of like trivial. So in your thing, you're really encapsulating that, which is rather glorious, actually.
Well, thank you. It was not a part of the plan, but I'm glad that it's there.
But life is like that, isn't it, though? You know, it's like both we're the most meaningful person to us because we live our life, but we kind of know we're meaningless as well, you know, in the sense of the scheme of things, you know. And this virus, you know, that we're living in at the moment reminds us of that, really, that we're just a species that's a bit vulnerable at the moment, you know. And it's, you know, so it's an interesting, I always find that quite interesting anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt it as well, especially nature seems to bring it out, the enormity of things, and that we are just an insignificant dot on this landscape, yet also I'm part of that, and feeling so connected to it at the same time.
Yeah, there's a really interesting validity I get about it. You know, I'm a valid being on this planet. You know, I'm not the most important. I'm the most important to me, you know, and the second most important to my wife, I hope. And, you know, she should be the most important. But, you know, I am, you know, I will die, and people will forget me in 100, 200 years time, or maybe even quicker. But, you know, but it's like, it is also, I'm valid. I'm allowed to be here. It's okay. Yeah. And that's a huge sense of confidence when we can feel that.
Yeah. And I'm coming back to what you said about team and solo work as well, because I am the individual doing all of those activities, yet as you touched on, I do have a team of, at the moment, it's growing to be over 20 people who are integral in supporting me along the way. Based on your experience when working as teams and there is a leader, a very obvious leader of the company or organization, how do you create that morale or measure the morale to keep people engaged in that movement of that one person when it's not actually them who's doing the activities?
Well, I think so. I lead a team of 12 people at the moment in my business, and I think part of it is setting the vision and setting the pathway towards that. But part of the role is cheerleader. Part of the role is helping them feel and do good work, you know, feel they're doing good work, and do good work and feel they're doing it. And so you're asking them to buy into your vision, you know, that this is an extraordinary thing to do, which it most certainly is. Yeah. And an inspiring thing to do. And so, but it's also doing that in a way that doesn't set you to be too aloof from them, too distant from them, you know, and you can't be too egotistical or arrogant. But you don't strike me as an egotistical or arrogant person, but you must have some drive, because you couldn't do what you do if you didn't have drive. But drive is different than pure ego. So it's a question of like ensuring it's working for them. And you know, I don't know whether they're volunteers or they're paid or how that's going to work, you know. I mean, you know, but you know, particularly, well, I think we actually, in some ways, it doesn't matter whether it's a volunteer or paid. It's ensuring that they are getting things out of it as well as you. So if you've got someone that's managing your equipment, I mean, I imagine that there's someone who's obsessed with bicycles that's on your team, you know, and getting them to run perfectly, you know, and you know, sort of recognizing their skill and their contribution, and getting to understand their world. I think it's to get to understand your team and their drives and their personal lives and what's going on for them, without being intrusive, and also understanding you're not their best friend. I mean, some of the mistakes I've sometimes got to in a leader is trying to be too much a really good friend to people. And I'm not a friend. I am a friend. I'm friendly, but it's a different relationship, but it's still a human relationship, and it should be meaningful for both sides. And there should be reciprocity in that relationship. I think at the heart of all relationships is reciprocity, is giving and receiving. And there are times when we give more than we receive, but we will get drained if we do that too much. And if we take without giving back, people will go away from us. So it's that piece that's the thing to do. I don't know if that's helpful, but
yeah, definitely. I mean, I've got a combination of paid team as well as volunteers, so it's quite an interesting mix. But I think what I'm going to be introducing at the very base level is that how are you feeling, the Friday Pulse, just making sure everyone's communicating and supporting as a one unit.
Well, you can use Friday Pulse. I'll give it to you for the period, and for your team of 20, and you can track it, and the system will keep score of it. It will be more about how they're feeling about the work with you, but you can use that and do that and see, and it basically, that's what it does. It asks people how they feel every week. It asks them what's a success for them, who they want to thank, have they got any frustrations, have they got any ideas, and it's as simple as that. And you just and it just ticks over, and you do it, and then you're keeping track of that, and if you get on with it, just keep using it for the 2 years.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Nic. That's that's very good.
It's an easy thing to give. but it's and then try and encourage people. So what we encourage people is to do in the way that teams use Friday Pulse and organizations use it, is that we encourage them on a Friday. We ask them these questions, have you felt that stuff? And then on a Monday, we feed that back to them, and they can look at their results, and we encourage them to have a little quarter of an hour, 20-minute meeting where they just say, how was last week? And they've got the data there, they've got the questions there, and they can talk about it. And then that's the thing, that's the feedback loop that I'm talking about. The learning feedback loop is that you reflect, you discuss, and then your actions change. And you can do that very deliberately, or you can just do it subtly by the very fact that you're asking every week. It brings into everyone's attention that they matter, their experience matters. So if you're running a team at work, an organization at work, you are communicating that people's experience matters to you because you ask every week. But it's also in your self-interest, because if people enjoy their work, they work better. So there's a win-win, a massive win-win here. That's not stupid what I've designed here. Designed it to be a win-win. And often with sort of employee engagement, which is what we sort of compete against, it feels exactly the opposite. It feels like, what can we get out of you? How can you be more? We want you more engaged, because we want to make more money from you. And it can land that way in some ways. Whereas this is landing like, I want you to have a good experience, and I know that if you have a good experience, we'll work better together. And so it's a sort of more trusting way of doing it, and that's the design principle behind it.
Yeah. Have you noticed the world shifting more towards that we're not looking for what can we get out of connections, but we're looking more at how can we collaborate as a give and take?
Yeah, I think that there's big trends, and then there's the immediate thing going on now with COVID, but the big trend has been towards experience over the last 10-20 years, in the sense that when I started out measuring well-being in 2001, hardly anyone had heard of the word, certainly not in a policy term, certainly wasn't thought about measuring. I was one of the first people to start talking about how do you measure it. I wasn't the only person, but one of the first in a policy realm. And my big thing as a statistician is, I think partly what we measure is what we attend to. It is in some ways a trick, in the sense that by that idea of like, you should be coloring in a chart for yourself, you're putting it out of yourself so you can see it. You're externalizing your internal world, and that helps you be more reflective. And in that sense, we're a reflective process. We put the numbers on it. But from a pure analytics perspective, it helps senior leaders see across all of the organization what's going. So there's all that data stuff that goes there. But at the human level, it's helping us reflect and do that. And no, we've forgotten what it was. There was something I was starting. I was going somewhere else about how we use it. But the idea is to the measurement side is as much as anything to help us reflect.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, because I'm definitely going to be building that into my 2-year plan for myself and my team, that we have those moments of reflection, of gratitude, and also acknowledgements as well.
Yeah, and not to avoid the bad stuff, in the sense that, our grandmothers would say a stitch in time saves 9. And with frustrations at work, that's absolutely true. If you let frustrations fester, they grow, they go moldy, they go off, they get infected. And that's where gossip comes in. That's where negativity comes in. And so actually, by listening to people's frustrations as quickly as when they happen, then you can fix them and deal with them and move on. And in lots of ways, this is what someone like Amy Edmondson or Google will talk about: psychological safety. You want to create a psychologically safe environment where people feel they can say when things not going right. They feel they can come up with their own idea. So you would want your own team to be suggesting ways that, Kate does better, because the whole team goal is for you to do it. I mean, Andy Murray would be a great guest for you. He must be the world's expert on how you create this team of people around you. You should ask him on here, because, you see him and he always talks about his team, doesn't he? Although he's an individual player, I think he's a remarkable young man. And, he always talks about his team, and we're doing this. And yet, of course, it's him, but he doesn't talk I, me, he talks we all the time. I think there's something to be learned in that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you've got his number, I'd more than happily have a chat.
Well, I'm sure you can find him somewhere, but I mean, or I don't know whether he writes about that, but he does seem to me someone that doesn't have a huge ego, and it's a sports person, and yet and I don't know how you view him. I view him as an overachiever, in the sense that, I mean, he's had this extraordinary people to compete against for so long, and yet he has won, grand slams. And and he isn't as sublime a player as Federer or Nadal. Djokovic and him a bit more similar, but Djokovic is, I don't know, extraordinary, isn't he? But Murray is brilliant. I just think he's, for me, I'm much more excited about him as a sportsman than, say, Lewis Hamilton, who I guess is probably even better in his sport. But, you feel Lewis Hamilton's a bit more about me. He's very teamy. I like him.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to readjust, because I do have Team Strong on the side, but I really talk about them. So I will introduce them a bit more into the public sphere.
Is that your birth name, Strong?
It is. I was born strong.
Yeah, that's great, isn't it?
Quite handy.
What a brilliant name to be born with. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it came with its challenges, because when I was growing up, my father would say, don't show emotions, don't cry, don't be weak. And so I did collapse vulnerability with the antithesis of being strong. Yeah. So it took me a while to be able to open up and show when I wasn't, when I was struggling. So it like everything, I suppose, there's always the dark side and the light side. So that's something I was grappling with. With
all due respect to your father, I would say he's wrong, in that I think it's a strength to show your vulnerability, in this, and I think that's a lesson we all have to learn. I've had to learn that, as a, I think it's a very typical thing for a man to feel, he can't show, vulnerability, and I've learned over the decades to, particularly if you're looking to build a loving relationship, you need to show your vulnerability, and actually to be a leader at work, you don't want to come across as sort of flapping and floundering, but to say, like in the last 6 weeks with COVID, to call my team in and say, look, this is a real challenge for us. We've had a couple of clients, go bankrupt on us and owing us money. We can't physically work together. These are challenges for a small organization, and to be honest and open those and go, this is how we move forward together. And actually, for example, I've had to cut the salaries of all of my team because we're in an investment program and we need to stretch that further, because I don't know, the uncertainty about next round of investment is further in the future and more uncertain, and so we just need to make the money we've got go last. And I gathered everyone together. Everyone immediately agreed to take a 20% pay cut, and we moved forward. So and people will do that with you when you've got a strong vision and you communicate, but you need to express your vulnerability there too, and say, this is too much is falling on me as the leader. We need to share this burden. And I think relationships, clearly love relationships are built on that, are built on mutual need as well as mutual desire, mutual lust and mutual aspirations, built on all of it. But it's partly on vulnerability, is that, I want to be taken care of. I want to take care of you. The fact I want to be taken care of was to say that I have vulnerabilities. And that's the basis of love. So if you're too strong, I don't think you open yourself up to that world.
Yeah, I agree. And it's something that I saw as that I needed to work on a fair few years ago. So I am opening up. And to tell you the truth, I have no idea how I'm going to do what I've just said. I'm hoping my team work that one out with me. So there's a lot of weakness I'm showing, but I see that as a strength, because a lot more ideas are falling in that I could ever imagine myself.
And that's the beautiful thing of working in a team, is that they come up with great ideas, and I built a team in the mid 2000s at this think tank I was working at, and my father was the business guy, and he said, look, Nick, dare to employ people more intelligent than you. That's the thing you have to dare to do. And one of my first recruitment round was hiring and this young statistician, he's a lovely soul, Surma, and he was playing. The thing I'm probably most famous for is something called the Happy Planet Index. I've done a TED talk on it, and but when we were creating it, I had a particular statistical design for it, and Surma started working on the team, and he started changing some of the things, and I was like, no, this is what it looks like. This is what it is, and he goes, well, don't you want it to be better? And he was like 27 or something. I was at least 10, 15 years older than him. And I thought, well, yeah, I do want it to be better, and I need to listen more to your ideas, And actually, over the years, Sam and I, we still have one point of tension with how this index is structured. But his desire was to improve it. And I thought, yeah, that is why I employ a very smart, technical statistician, because I am a statistician. I'm more of he's a more technical, detailed statistician than me. And there were good points he was making about it. And I was in the vision of it, the vision of it remained the same. We just got technically a bit better. But it was very funny. And I was just like so impressed with me that he just looked me in the eye and went, don't you think it should be better? And I thought, yeah, you're right there.
I love it. Yeah. Well, on that point, I'd love to ask you a few questions if it's okay with you.
Sure.
And the first one's very relevant to what you've just brought up, which is, what one skill do you think leaders today, or people striving to step up, we need more of today?
One skill. Well, I think that anyone that is setting themselves in a position of a leader probably already has vision, but I think it's being open to being surprised, being open to being wrong, is what's going to help you. I mean, yeah, in that sense, I think that all of us can learn. If we keep learning, everything is good. And that openness is probably what I would most say. I think they need to.
Yeah, that's really apparent, and it gives us the flexibility to change as well. But as you said, keep that vision in place as well.
Yeah, and of course, there's one guy I used to know, and he what did he say? He said you need to have vision and doubt, and the doubt is helpful because it helps you be honest.
Yeah.
And in a sense, I guess you must be a potential victim of burnout over the next 2 years, because you've got such a big goal, and you are going to be putting your body physically through a lot and whatever. And burnout tends to happen with people that are very passionate about their goals, and they stop taking self-care of themselves and overstretch themselves. And so that sort of doubt about, not your goal, but actually how you're doing, will probably help you. And it's a bit muddled up there, but I think what I mean is that we need to keep checking with that doubt, and self-care. You're going to have to practice self-care, which might be difficult for you as Kate Strong to think about, looking after Kate too. But in that sense, you're going to have to look after yourself.
Yeah, I am getting better, I have to say. I have regularly evenings with no internet or no electronics, and it's all about me and just I can read a book or, you know, have a bath, whatever I choose. So I do give myself the downtime as well. But yeah, it'd be interesting to track it and see the weeks I miss it. How does that impact my joy or my resilience?
Yeah.
Will. And another question, personally, what do you follow more, logic or intuition?
Oh, I'm intuition first, logic second. So I'm very gut and heart led, then check. So I think you need both of them. For me, and I don't know whether it's generalized to everybody, but I think emotion comes first. I think the feeling for things comes first, and then the cognition kicks in. And so I think if you've got a vision, the desire, the motivation comes first, and then we put in all the logic behind it. And of course, if you can't put the logic in behind it, you really need to challenge the first thing. And so yeah, I'm intuition first, logic second. And in fact, there's a funny story. As I was once walking on a beach, and someone had drawn a heart on the beach, and they put "follow your heart" on it, and it was beautifully done on this big beach. And I took a photograph of it, and I sent it to my kids, and one of my sons texted straight back, "And take your brain with you." So follow your heart, take your brain with you. It just was so funny. And it is that heart, take the head too. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like that order. It works for me. And another question is, how do you deal with failure or not achieving goals?
I'm a relentless optimist. So what I tend to do is I tend to so basically you have a goal and you try and get it, and then let's say you spectacularly fail, like don't get into a university or don't get a job you want to. My way of dealing with that is to then go, I didn't want it anyway. So is to sort of de-escalate the aim of the goal. So but of course that's just an emotional coping with it. But in some ways, I think it's helpful to sort of think it wasn't right for me, and it is sort of the way that like if you read people's autobiographies, and some people had terrible things happen to them, and they look back and go, I'm glad it happened because I learned this. I'm that sort of person that I'll take something that's a setback and I'll think it's really good I had that experience because I've learned this and this. Whereas some people find it really hard to get beyond that experience and they sort of stay down there. So actually I think it's psychologically helpful to sort of think, one, maybe it didn't matter as much as I thought it did at the time, and it nearly always doesn't. And also, what can I learn from it? Now, learning, in some ways there people say there's no such thing as failure, there's only learnings, and I think that is true, but that's not how it feels. In the time it feels like dreadful. I mean, I've had things not go right, particularly at a relationship level. I'm remarried now, but when you come out of a relationship that you invested an awful lot in and it's gone wrong, and I had to learn that lesson twice in life. It's very, very painful, and at the time you're not thinking I'm glad I've got this failure. But when you look back 5-10 years later, there's so many things I learned from that. And there's so much more. I'm a much more rounded human being, my stomach as well as my psychology. But, I'm much more, and I'm happier and I'm more, so in those ways, I think they're really good experiences for me at the time. Did not like them at all.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of a time I bought a bicycle when I was 19 with my parents. We went to America, so it was this amazing brand new bicycle that got stolen just last year. So I was 40, so I've had it all that time. And ironically, I was outside a church at a Buddhist talk about karma. And when I came out with my helmet on and there was no bicycle, for 10 minutes I was angry, I was sad, I was gutted and slightly shamed as well, because I was thinking, karma, what's the world trying to tell me? But as you said, the optimism of me came in. Well, maybe it saved me from that bus accident, that round the corner I would have been hit by a bus. So we never know until we look backwards. So yeah, it's about, I suppose, dealing with optimism as well, but also a bit of reality.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people say, people who are classified as pessimists psychologically say I'm a realist, and I can get that an extent, but I think that how you frame things and how you do does affect your ability to achieve them. I mean, you're obviously an optimist to think that you can do those three things. I believe you will do them sincerely. But you've got to be massively ambitious and optimistic. And same for me, setting up a business, you've got to be an optimist.
Yeah.
Pretty hard to set up a business or whatever you want to be if you're a practitioner, which is really helpful things to do. But if you want to set up something, do something completely new, you've got to be slightly crazy.
Yeah, that's very wise. And what keeps you motivated every day?
I think probably I am what would be called philosophically an Aristotelian. I follow Aristotle, and Aristotle effectively talks about the life well lived, and his idea about happiness and well-being was something called eudaimonia, and it's about effectively, if you get to the end of your life and you look back, do you feel you've had a good life? And of course, you may not have that moment of reflection on your deathbed. You may, but what motivates me an awful lot is what can I contribute to the world? And I don't mean that, I just mean as in, how can I leave it a little bit better than I am? I'm a statistician. That's it's a trade. and but I mean, the way I've approached my statistics is how can I improve the world? So that's why I've done quality of life, well-being, happiness. And I think that's hugely, hugely important to me is that feeling that I'm contributing, that I'm doing my bit. And so that motivates me massively, because in lots of ways I have enough money. I have a good relationship now, stable and loving, and, but I don't want to retire and play golf or whatever some people do. I want to, I'd like to be 80 and still doing stuff. And, and the world, there's a lot to do in the world. I'm someone that thinks that the world is both wonderful and, just a little bit unjust. And so, let's, appreciate wonder, but let's try and reduce injustice and inequalities. And climate change and things like that worry me. And so what can we do towards those things? And so how I contribute, and that's what motivates me, and that's what gets me, and that's what's got me up for 30 years really, is doing that. And I've in some ways been lucky in that I've become obsessed with an idea, and I sometimes say, I don't think you have an idea, I think an idea has you. And this idea has grabbed me for 25 years of my 30 years of my career. How do we measure quality of life? How do we improve it? And I'm still as excited about that every day. And it's still as excited about, how can I help people lead better lives? That's what gets me going.
That's wonderful. And finally, to everyone listening on this podcast who, if like me, found it very informative, but also quite uplifting, what one message would you like us to be left with?
There's a Buddhist saying, which, like some Buddhist sayings, is paradoxical. And the saying I really like is, there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. And I think that if you can live a life where you look for joy and laughter and good feeling, and that you'll make a better life. And so it's not something in the future. It's not a beach that you travel to and you lie down on. It's right here, right now. And that's obviously sometimes you feel far away from happiness and from your own contentment, but I think if you can find your sort of inner motivations and things and enjoy them, take life's challenges, indignities. I'm going to be dead in 30 years time, 40 years time. I will slowly decay, but take those indignities of age, those with laughter and humor and love, and the world will be better. And that's, so it's sort of an acceptance, but it's really looking at those positives. I'm a genuine believer, if you look on the positive side, better things happen. Doesn't mean to say you won't get cancer. Doesn't mean to say you won't get these things, but you'll deal with them better. So,
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that, Nic. And I, for one, during these 2 years, will be using, Friday Pulse, and I'll be sharing what we're measuring, and also how that tracks directly to physical output, just out of curiosity. But for anyone else, organizations and individuals who want to get in touch, how can we do that?
Yes, so we're called Friday Pulse. So our website is obviously fridaypulse.com. But at the moment, during it's unprecedented times that we're facing, we're offering free access to the platform for any organization up to 1,000 people for 3 months, so you can get to try it and use it and see whether it helps you. And so that's where you find us. I've got my own personal website, which is just nicmarks.org. Nic is no K. And I put an article up there most weeks. I sometimes miss a week, but most weeks I'm putting an article up on there. So those are really the ways to find out about us.
Wonderful. And I'll be sure to share them in the show notes as well. But yeah, thank you so much, Nic, for your insight. I feel more prepared as well moving forward, because it's not just about the physical, it's also about the psychological, the spiritual, and the resilience side of it. Yeah. And thank you so much for your time today.
That's great. It's lovely to talk to you. A really nice angle to talk to us. So good luck. I mean, it won't be luck. Go well.
Thank you.